Yeah, you don't. Can you stay a few minutes?
I'll try
Ah,
my
you.
best. Yes, I think so. I think so. I'll stay here and I
Okay.
can say hello.
Good. I see that you started the recording already. We might have to just edit it in the end to remove this beginning, but it's fine. Everybody needs to agree. It's something that one has to say in the beginning.
Oh, yeah,
But
true.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Very well.
yeah, we still like have perhaps to wait 1 minute more, so to give the chance for a few more colleagues to join. And yeah, Sebastian, thanks for taking care of the recording then. And of course,
I
we
think
know you guys are busy, and just feel
it
free to jump
it
off.
it worked also last time. I remember that I press on recording and then I can even move out, shut my laptop, and it will still record, and then I'll get it afterwards. Yeah, yeah.
Good. Ah, Evandro is there. Great. Yeah, that's a good feature, so that we know that the recording is for sure being saved somewhere. And yeah, I think everybody will start coming in. I'll start sharing my screen. Again, some housekeeping issues. You can say something about you in the chat if you want to. The meeting will be recorded or is already being recorded. And yeah, if your connection allows, of course, you can keep your camera on. And perhaps we just get started. And I think a few more colleagues will be joining. We had quite a few confirmations, but just that we don't get so delayed. And yeah, Sebastian, perhaps you want to say a few welcome words just while you are
Yes.
still here. Yes.
Hello to everyone to the new webinar this year's climate-related services and frameworks for cities. It's the first one that we're having in 2023. And yeah, I think it's a very relevant one. What I can just tell from what I experienced right now in the morning, I think this could be a nice start or a nice teaser for today's webinar. I'm right now here in Agra in India at the cluster workshop of the SUID cluster, Stable Urban Industrial Development. And yesterday in the evening, we had a light start with a project bazaar. And today in the morning, there's some kind of a spaceship going to a different planet, like a nice scenario where you have to get a little bit adjusted to and how actually the ideal planet should look like with clay. Yeah. So colleagues from different projects all over the cluster were coming together in this. At the end, we were 10 working group when it came to climate, urban climate action, climate resilience. There were also other working groups on water sanitation, gender, and so on and so forth. But the one on climate actually was also consistent out of 10 people from 10 different projects because it is very cross-cutting. Yeah, and then we started thinking about how can we create this ideal planet or this ideal vision, how the planet could look like. Yeah. And everyone came a little bit from his or her project angle and started then putting some ideas. There could be kind of a water drain. There could be sustainable fishery. There could be kind of a smart governance model implemented, monitoring evaluation system, like command and control centers, and so on and so forth. So at the end, we used nearly most of the clay that we were having, and we were working on it for 2 hours. And you saw lots of input from different people, like a big island, which lots of input and lots of features that was actually made out of that. Yeah. So it really showed us how cross-cutting the topic is, how actually lots of projects in a way also work in that field. It really reaches out to lots of different features, angles, ideas, and so on and so forth. Yeah, this is also then the narrative which we were supposed to develop to really say, look very broad, network, look beyond your borders, and this is coming back to the webinar and also to TurboClick itself, which we are seeing it here, is also really like, bridging also the two different working groups. On the one hand, with two of us, and on the other hand, with SNGA, like the climate aspect, rural development, infrastructure aspect on the one hand, with the governance aspect on the other hand. So very happy that again we are here today, and again we have this opportunity for exchange. I unfortunately would need to leave again, but I hope that next time I'll have the chance and the events are not colliding as much as these days. I have the feeling they're mostly doing, but yeah, it's always in safe hands with Lucy. This I know, and I'm also very happy that I think from our FMP side, Philip, you are back. Great to have you again. Well, understood only currently for an acting time, no, in Charlotte's absence, but great to have you also here. And Sandra is also here. And Peter, we will talk about your India visit perhaps later that week. This is also on my list. All right.
Great.
Good. Then have a great.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Sebastian. Thanks for setting the scene and also for this interesting story about this idea of designing the city of the future. I think that's quite much related to what we want to discuss after all, as we set the scene today also now for the new training that we are developing, but we will talk about this later. And yeah, the topic is climate change and resilience and adaptation, mitigation, and all these issues. And of course, we are really happy today that we are able to have two inputs and to set the scene for this new training we are developing. We will start with where to start, how to use risk assessments for effective climate change adaptation for infrastructure, the PI-VC protocol with Katharina Lotzen. I will introduce her just in a bit. And we also have the great pleasure to talk again about CityWorks today, and also about the analytical framework for urban resilience. That will be explained by Eva Maria Graf and Philippe Vieira. I will also just now officially introduce them and really say a very, very heartily thank and big welcome to you. Thanks for making this possible, for being here, for taking the time to exchange and discuss with us. Katharina Lotzen is an advisor with so she has been working on resilient infrastructure since 2017 when she joined GIZ, and is currently advisor to the EKI global project called Enhancing Climate Services for Infrastructure Investment, CSI, where she's responsible for the global coordination of activities in Vietnam and also for digitalization activities in Brazil, and as well as the international PI-VC practitioners network, which she will also talk about today, and also has been launched by GIZ together with the Canadian partners, the Climate Risk Institute and the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, ILCR. Welcome, Katharina. Really looking forward to your presentation just in a bit. Katharina will start, and then we will have Eva Maria Graf and Philippe Vieira for the second presentation. Eva is an advisor with the sector program cities and is consulting with the BMZ on several topics such as resilience, adaptation, and also just transition. And she is coordinating, and I'm really happy that we work together so closely, the Toolbox CityWorks, which supports cities in implementing global agendas such as the Agenda 2030 locally. And together with other GIZ colleagues, also then Philip, also represented here, and other colleagues in FMB in Globe, she is currently working on a toolbox of urban resilience measures, which we will also explain a bit today. And Philip, last but not least, back with us for some time now as an interim tandem partner, but also dear to our network. He's the planning officer, plans and design projects in the area of local and urban development. in the conflict and governance and conflict division, and he's been working for more than a decade in urban and good governance issues, and has been in long-term assignments in Nepal and Pakistan, so also know well the region. And with that, I would hand over to Katarina. I'll stop sharing my presentation so you can share it from your end, Katarina. I think it's easier so that you can run it from your side. And after Katarina's presentation, we have some time also for some questions, and then we move to the presentation from Eva and Philip. So over to you, Katarina. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucy. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Nice for this opportunity to speak in front of all of you. I think might as well, and we didn't do it today, but also Sandra could have joined me in this presentation, because what I'm going to talk about today is Hi, Sandra. Nice to have you here as well. Maybe you will be able to jump in if you want from time to time in the presentation. So what we want to talk about is, as was said, the PIVC climate risk assessment methodology, which is a climate risk assessment methodology specifically designed for the use in infrastructure. And of course, I'm part of the CSI project, as Lucy mentioned, the project Enhancing Climate Services for Infrastructure Investments, where I work as an advisor. But also we as GIZ, we are part of the PIVC Alliance, which is basically a group of institutions which are jointly, let's say, stewarding this methodology. So we as GIZ have since 2020 taken on this methodology under our belt, and we're now in this context working with FMB, with Sandra Schuster, on making this part of the service of GIZ, which is also why I'm talking about it today, because we were thinking it's important for all of us to know that we have this methodology. It's a good one, and that we can use it. So this is what I'm going to talk about. So to get into the presentation, after this short introduction, I'm going to talk a bit about what the PIVC is. You're maybe wondering now, it seems like a very mysterious abbreviation, I'm sure. And talking a bit what we've achieved with this methodology so far, and talking about all the resources it entails and how it may be used in the future by GIZ and, of course, its partner countries. So what is the PIVC? First of all, the abbreviation as such is not that important, but it stands for Public Infrastructure Engineering Vulnerability Committee, which is the committee that developed the methodology, and this gave the name to it. It's basically like Xerox or Tempo tissues. It's just a brand name nowadays. And basically what it is, it's a step-by-step approach for climate risk assessments. So basically, it was developed with the ISO norms on adaptation and climate and risk management in mind, and giving you guidance on how can you do a risk assessment that is compliant with these ISO norms. Because as you will know, if anybody of you has ever read an ISO norm, they are not necessarily user-friendly or application-friendly. So this is has been the idea behind it. And basically what you can do with this, to give you a very brief idea, you can basically use this, you can look at the climate risks for a single infrastructure or for a whole asset portfolio to see, okay, what are my weak points? What are the weak points in my infrastructure? If in relation to climate change, where should I focus my spending? And this is why I said in the title of this presentation, where to start, right? Because we have limited funds for adaptation and we need to know where we should start first. And this is what the PIVC helps you to decide on, where to focus this kind of adaptation spending. And very much in line with our ideas as how we work as GIZ, it's a bottom-up approach, it's participatory. So basically what you do with the PIVC is you build a team of experts to implement the methodology together with your partners. So you identify institutions in your partner countries with whom you do the risk assessment, which needs to, first of all, of course, building their capacity on doing risk assessments. But also it helps you because, of course, in many of our contexts, we have a big lack of data, like lack of information. And this is what you can really use this knowledge of local people, local institutions to build on. And the other thing that's specific about the PIVC, it's a threshold-based approach. Anybody working in infrastructure will know that thresholds are quite important for infrastructure. If you build, for example, a bridge, you will build it for a 1,000-year flooding event. You have this threshold in mind, you know what your 1,000-year flooding is, but the truth is that not the whole bridge is the same. Each component of this bridge has a different kind of threshold for different kinds of climatic events. some elements of the bridge can cope better with flooding than others can. Maybe the pillar of the may be quite sturdy, even though we saw in the Ahr River Valley that maybe they are not if a camping van is forced into them by flooding. But basically, this could be the idea. But then the surface of the bridge may not need to be as sturdy, because anyhow, every 20 years you have to change it. So this is a bit the idea of the PIVC. You look at each and every single component, and you find out what is the critical climate event, when it will fail and when it will stop to work. And this will guide you in identifying the weak points. So we have now applied the PIVC. It has been developed in Canada, and I will very briefly talk about how it has been developed in a second. But outside of Canada, where it has been applied more than 150 times now, we have applied it in our partner countries of the CSI project, so Brazil, Costa Rica, the Nile Basin, and in Vietnam. But it's also been applied. Other projects are by and by taking it up. We are applying it in Lesotho. We are now having interest in Thailand and Georgia for applying it in Iraq. We have applications outside of GIZ contexts in Honduras, in Peru. So we have like this bigger interest building up for this methodology, and by it's being applied more and more. And what you will find is, if you look at this webpage, which I put on the presentation, that basically it has been applied in any sector of infrastructure that you may think of. And it has been applied in many different ways and forms. You can think about, okay, I want to look at all of my assets in a certain area, for example, in a quarter, in a city, because the climate is quite similar for this area, but the infrastructures are varied. Or you may think of, okay, what we did in Brazil is we looked at all 21 seaports. The infrastructure is quite similar, but the climate, of course, throughout Brazil will be quite different. And basically, the different components of what we did with this methodology in our project, but what we envisioned as GIZ's role also in the future with this methodology, is to have different kinds of components, how we can support our partners in climate proofing of infrastructure. So first of all, of course, we as GIZ, we have always an important role as interface to different kinds of experts, that we connect our partners to experts, but we also connect our partner institutions to each others. We, of course, have the methodology as such at our hand, but we also have a lot of training materials now for the methodology, including e-learnings, but also, of course, in-person trainings, training of trainers, all these kinds of things. And we have worked with our partners on institutionalization. We have taken different approaches in each of our countries. So you can think about building codes, but you can also think about how can we put it into investment planning laws, that you have to consider climate risk. You need these kinds of institutional frameworks, because infrastructure planners will only apply a new methodology if they are basically forced to do so, and if they also, through investment planning, get the funding to do so. And of course, the other big factor, which is also part of the name of my project, are the climate services. Anybody that has tried to do a climate risk assessment in our partner context will find that getting climate services, getting good projections and all this is quite hard. And this is also something to work on. Some examples of what we did, for example, in Vietnam, we worked on the Kai Long Kai Base Sluice Gate. We did a climate risk assessment in the early design stage. So we had the very early design drafts of this infrastructure where we started our project. We did a risk assessment. And based on this risk assessment, some design changes were made. For example, the wiring was moved underground. They used a different type of concrete. And which will surprise all Germans with our big infrastructure project, but it's already standing. You can already see this infrastructure in the time of our project. It has been planned and built. So this is the infrastructure you see here, and you see, and it was really helpful for our partners to use the methodology to have a good argumentation for their design decisions. In Brazil, as I said, we worked on 21 seaports. We first analyzed 21 seaports, identified the 3 most vulnerable seaports, and then did a more in-depth analysis of those. And now the government of Brazil is taking this on and has done the same kind of work for their roads and railroads, which are also, we had recent flooding and landslides, which is also quite important for the country. And then in Costa Rica, we were quite successful in having be more successful on the institutional side of things in advising our partners, who now have, first of all, a decree that forces infrastructure planners to consider climate change in the planning of infrastructure, but they also develop their own methodology, which helps their engineers to apply this decree. So this methodology is based on the PyVC methodology. And then we have the Nile Basin Initiative, and the Nile Basin Initiative, their role is basically in working on transboundary infrastructures, and they advise their partner countries in this, or their member countries. And this, they do a lot of work in the pre-feasibility stage. So when countries are looking for funding for their infrastructures, and of course, to get funding, your infrastructures need to be climate proof. So here you get this financing idea. So they developed a whole digital knowledge hub on how can you do climate proofing for their partner countries, and the PyVC methodology is an important part of this. I'm not sure, I didn't check my time. So Lucy, you will send me warning signs if I'm taking too long for my presentation.
Sure.
Okay. So basically, so now I showed you like some results and some the basics of the methodology, a very brief background. Of course, we share this presentation, so forgive me for being quite quick about this, but just for the background of the methodology, we as GIZ took it over, or took it on in 2017 with this project, but it has already been developed in 2005 in Canada. Basically, the Canadian government asked the Engineers Canada, the Canadian Engineering Association, to work on a methodology to support its engineers to consider climate change, because nothing like this really existed back in the day. And then they set up this committee I mentioned at the beginning, and they developed this methodology with this big committee, and it's now being applied more and more times. And even Canada, they have set up a mechanism where to get adaptation funding for your infrastructures, you need to use a methodology, a climate risk assessment methodology, to get this kind of funding. And the PyVC is one of the methodologies you can use, which is also leading to more and more applications of the methodology now in Canada. And yeah, I spoke about it. It has been used many times. I encourage you, if you are working in a specific sector, to maybe use this link to take a look at the different assessments that have been done, because you will find, as I said, basically for each sector you can think about, there will be an assessment already available, and we're using the information from the assessments to build the knowledge and to make it easier to do future assessments, of course. And yeah, since 2020, this I mentioned, GIZ is basically co-owner of the methodology, together with the Climate Risk Institute and the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. In our project, we took the solution then to have grant agreements with the Climate Risk Institute. So we as GIZ and the Climate Risk Institute are more the international arm of the PyVC, and the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, they are strongly affiliated with the insurance sector, and they are more the Canadian, do more of the Canadian side of things. And we are using basically all these experiences we're building to feed back into the bigger PyVC practice. So here you see the timeline. So what we have managed to do, since we as GIZ also took over the methodology together with the other partners, is develop more guidance. We have now, this has been launched most recently, and it's currently being applied in Lesotho. We have now launched the PyVC Green, for example, which helps you to consider more the environment of the infrastructure. Basically, it allows you to take everything into account that's also happening outside the infrastructure when you do a risk assessment. So basically, it adds, if some of you know the vulnerability source book, it adds the impact chain logic to this. So really looking back, how is the ecosystem and the infrastructure interacting? It's quite a nice and innovative methodology, but we've also added other guiding documents, and we are constantly adding those. So I encourage you, and I will share later the link to have a look at these documents, especially the catalog, because the catalog is the idea of having, which helps you to decide which methodology to use, basically. Yeah, there's also a big range of trainings. The Climate Risk Institute does a lot of trainings, which are all available online. You can take a look at those, but it's also, from our perspective as GIZ, of course, quite interesting to build on this, for our partners, to make these kinds of trainings available. And we have now started an international practitioners network, which is available online. You find the QR code here. And the idea is to have, in terms of an, let's say, exit, or to be able for our partners themselves to access all of this kind of expertise and guidance that's available in Canada and throughout the world. And in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a conference in Vancouver in the context of this international practitioners community to further foster this kind of exchange, because it's quite important, because all these different institutions around the world are building on and expanding on the methodology constantly. So yeah, here's the PyVC Global Forum. Of course, the conference is already completely booked, but we will be sharing all the results we're creating there. So we're going to have, I think now it's 160 participants meeting up there to share about, to have this knowledge exchange. I could now also talk about the different modes of implementation, but maybe I would stop here. I'm not sure. Maybe it's going a bit too much into detail at this stage. I would stop here. I'm not sure whether we do questions now or do questions at the end. And maybe Sandra, whether you have anything to add now that we have you here.
Great. Thanks a lot, Katharina. Sandra, go ahead, please.
Just 2 points briefly. So we've been working on an advisory service, that are these 2-page documents that are available on the Fachexpertise portal. I don't know what this is in English. Basically the external web page of GIZ. So that's currently in the layout process. Since the CSI project will sadly finish this year, we want to, of course, use this amazing tool and the opportunities and the knowledge generated and the networks generated contributed to for the company. So that's anywhere, and infrastructure is anywhere relevant. So we'll hopefully you'll find information also on topics and trainings and all sorts of things. But yeah, we're definitely promoting this PyVC protocol within the company. So keep your eyes peeled. And the other thing, because Katharina mentioned the vulnerability sourcebook, there's also going to be an update this year as well. So this will be launched in autumn at the Adaptation Futures Conference. And yeah, we've just received the first draft this morning. So lots going on. That's it. Thank you, Katharina.
Great. Yeah, it's really such a amazing wealth of experience and a successful protocol, like setting of different offers that you have developed. So congratulations on that, and really very amazing experience in the different contexts. I would now, of course, open for questions, so we can take some time for questions to Katharina or to Sandra as well, and if not, Katharina can also then briefly also talk about the modes of implementation, but we could open for questions now. You can post them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself, turn your camera on and jump in. So perhaps I would have a question also, Katharina, just for me to understand a little bit about the added investment. If you have had any kind of some rule of like the certain amount that is planned for normal infrastructure, and when you then say, okay, now we have to climate proof it and deal with different kinds of scenarios, what is the range of added investment for certain infrastructure or per amount of dollar? What is there any figure we can deal with just to have an idea of what is it that is needed more of investment? Because sometimes it can be less, sometimes it can be a bigger amount. Anything you have on this?
I think it more relates to a big challenge we face with these risk assessments. So we have like the one case in Vietnam where we indeed implemented adaptation measures based on the assessment. I have to admit, I don't know the numbers by heart, but I can share we did a cost-benefit analysis based on this. And I think, definitely we had a positive cost-benefit ratio of the investment measures, but for sure, like we used better concrete was used, not we, but the Vietnamese government. And they changed the wiring, so it was more expensive. But in terms, if you compare the cost to the benefit, it makes sense. No, in the longer run, you're saving funds. In the other cases, what the challenge is, you may find funding to do the risk assessment, though these risk assessments are of course also not cheap. And if I talk about the modes of implementation, I can address this. They are cheap compared to how much an infrastructure costs, which is we often get addressed. Okay, you may pay let's say, like in Mexico, we had a case where it cost 20,000. And then if you think about what an infrastructure costs, it's crazy that this is considered a high cost. But then, of course, if you add elements such as capacity development, institutionalization, it will get more costly. You will add more cost to this. But the challenge is if you don't have in your investment planning, also doing the adaptation measures after you did the assessment, it's not going to happen, right? So this is the big challenge we face. So we have the risk assessments being done. And we have these cases, for example, in Brazil, I spoke about the roads and railroads where the analysis was done by the Brazilian government. We just gave guidance at that stage. And now they had these big landslides. So, and of course, in their recovery, they can now consider the risk assessment results because you have funds for the recovery. But we don't have current data where we say, okay, this was done, except the Vietnam case study, this was done, and then assessment adaptation measures were taken because it takes quite some time. Or usually you have these results, they lay around, and then for some reason you get the funds and then you can invest. And generally, I think like the challenge we face with adaptation from my point of view is, of course, when you do it, you hope the event never happens, right? You hope that these measures are never needed. So it's also hard to have the data nowadays because now we don't have that amount of warming that we are adapting to right now, right? So we will know in 50 years maybe how effective these measures were. Yeah, I know it's a long-winded answer. I wish I could give you now. I'm an economist. I wish I could tell you now like X million, but I can't. But there's some challenges related to this. But for the Vietnam case study, yeah, we had a positive ratio. I linked the cost benefit, and there you see the exact numbers, how much more the measures cost.
Yeah. No, thanks. That's fair enough. I think it's one thing we have to learn now because the costs are being bared by the general. It's always hard to make this calculation how to invest more in the beginning to save cost in the end because it's different kind of sources of also for who is paying the bill. But yeah, great. If there are no further questions. I mean, Katharina is also staying with us. Now, Tim, please go ahead. Oh, yeah, now I see two hands. Susanne, you were first, and then Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina, for the presentation. I have a very, very specific question, so maybe it's too specific for our projects. It's about data and for the vulnerability analysis, especially for flooding projects, we are discussing a lot on hydrological model and what data to take and so on and so on. And I was wondering, yeah, what data do you model and under which climate scenario?
So as for the climate scenario, this is a decision taken by the risk assessment group. Usually we're quite conservative, so we take 8.5 to say, okay, we are basically adapting to the worst case scenario. Some take medium scenarios, some suggest to take lower scenarios, being more optimistic about our mitigation actions, I guess. But it varies. But generally, this is a decision taken by the assessment group. So we don't, as GIZ, definitely not, but also even the consultants working on these assessments or other experts don't prescribe anything, but it needs to be an open discussion at the beginning to say, okay, what is the scenario? Sometimes it's governments have specific guidance on this. In other cases, this decision is taken by the group. But I think the cases I've been involved in, we took the 8.5. And then also in terms of the modeling, it varied. In Brazil and for the Nile Basin Initiative, we also did quite detailed hydrological modeling because like this data is hard to come by, right? In the other countries, we worked with simpler simplifications. In Costa Rica, for example, we took rainfall as proxy because we were not able to get hydrological data. So we had to use proxy data, which had to do and this is also the big issue with these assessments, data governance, right? Who has access to data? On what conditions is it shared? And in Costa Rica, we had this issue of the Meteorological Service not having access to hydrological data, which is owned by the electricity company, basically, electricity institution, right? So these are things you have to overcome, finding these data gaps. And for the minute details on the modeling, I would have to refer to you to our colleagues from Brazil. Our colleague there is a climate expert, and he can explain in detail. I can't. What I can say is that also what we did in some cases is we did statistical downscaling. Is what we applied, because also, as you will imagine, we don't have the kind of computers in our countries to do anything else. So, but of course, then later on we work, for example, with Gerix, and they did more detailed, but better downscaling. But then we also, I think what one of our partners told me after the assessment in Costa Rica said, like, what you also learn in the process is using the best available data. And normally the decisions you take, if you have to take decisions, ideally, which are no regret options, and the risk assessment will still give you the justification for those. But many of the decisions you're taking based on the assessment are going to make sense anyhow, to be quite frank, right? Because we don't invest enough in our infrastructure.
Great. Thank you. Tim?
Right. Yeah. Also from my side, thanks a lot for the presentation. A very interesting story. Also, my connection is a little bad, so if I just fade away, hope that's not happening. But anyways, my question is not as specific, but more in terms of cooperation with the partners, because that, at least in Bangladesh, is always a topic in terms of, especially if you introduce like a new tool approach or whatever, sometimes the countries actually already have such or similar approaches and tools. And how was it with yours? Can you give like a little example of where it maybe worked well, where it maybe did not work as well, in terms of like really, okay, maybe we even set up a project and then, okay, in the end, it didn't work out as planned because something else was in place already?
I think it was a mix. So basically, none of the countries really had a tool when we started. Who has tools is the other donors, right? Like World Bank has tools, UNDP has tools. But normally, what we found is that most in other risk assessments being done in the countries are basically quite top down. So they are done without the partners. There's a consultant. It's a complete black box. Nobody in the country learns how to do these assessments. So this is why the advantage we had with our methodology, having always doing it with the partners, them learning the methodology, also overcoming institutional concerns related to it, because people were part, it was quite transparent to them. So even the results in the end were quite accepted. What we had then is, like, as I said, like Costa Rica, then basically adapted the methodology to make it more their own, to not make it feel foreign, which we totally support. Other countries doing that. And then there was institutional conflict in Costa Rica because other ministries wanted to develop other methodologies. This is more what we faced. So it's not like that those that took part in the methodology supported it, but those outside it that didn't take part may think of, okay, but we have this methodology, let's use something completely different. So this was more the constrictions we faced. But generally, I think like the important part is in the beginning to explain how this may differ from other methodologies, because it's not it's not like the vulnerability sourcebook, for example. It's a different approach, or it's a project-based approach, because many risk assessment approaches are more, you are doing like maps based on those, right? Or something like this. So it's normally it always fit quite well into the existing methodological context, say it like this. If there's a methodology already existing, that's totally fine, right? You don't have to force anybody to use it, but we didn't experience any country already having something that's specifically for infrastructure projects. And that's going that deeply into the specifics of infrastructure.
Good. Thank you so much. I think GIZ is always doing this kind of institutional coordination and trying to bring partners also together. And this is also part of the approach anyway. So it's not only the technical knowledge, but also the institutional setting. And and each country has different settings and different challenges. Great, let's move forward. Katharina, if you're staying with us, and you can still, perhaps if there are any questions in the chat that can still be answered. And thanks so much for your inputs. And yeah, have fun in the conference in 2 weeks, and much success for the project as well. And now I head over to Philip and Eva. And Eva, you can share the presentation from your end, and we could start now with CityWorks and the new urban resilience framework. Over to you, Eva.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy, and also thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, basically Lucy approached us, right? As I understood, also there will be a training developed on climate sensitive and resilient cities. So basically today, Philip and me will present what we do in our group on resilience, some frameworks. Philip will present the work of the Task Force Adaptation, and I go quickly through CityWorks and specifically focusing on the topic of resilience. So first of all, because we have a video on CityWorks, I would share this. This will also save some time for me to explain it because we put it together in a nice teaser. So I will share the video with you. It's a 2-minute video. 1 second. Screen. Okay, and I hope the audio also works. Just let me know in case the audio doesn't work, then maybe Lucy, you have to share it. So here we go. Do you hear the audio? Yeah.
Eva, I cannot hear, and somehow it's also in French. Oh, it was just the subtitles, yeah. And you were muted, Eva, somehow, perhaps because you start sharing the screen or something.
Yeah, Lucy, can you try to share it? I think sometimes it's the settings, and it should work with you.
I have the worst settings at all because I'm external, Eva, so I'm not sure. I can try. It's the teaser, right?
Exactly.
So let me see. I have to share with computer sound. So nothing is happening from my end now somehow. Yeah, perhaps we can share the link, Eva, in the chat, and
yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, I think Susanna has if I share again.
Yeah, I tried that, but somehow
okay,
yeah,
otherwise it's fine. Then yeah, you can, I mean, we can skip the video, it's fine. I had that before, but last time it worked, so all right, so I can also just summarize what's in the video. That's fine. We just do the presentation. Okay, so Lucy posted again in the chat. So here's the video. I will share my presentation now. Second. Okay, there we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
awesome.
It's there.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, this is the video that you can have a look on after. Yeah, so basically CityWorks, Lucy already mentioned in the beginning, to put it very shortly, it's a working aid for the implementation of global agendas at city level. We in the sector program Cities developed CityWorks, starting in 2015, and now we have a digitalized toolbox with a lot of tools on different topics, focusing on different global agendas important for the urban context. Yeah, so in 2015 and 16, the global community adopted 5 important agendas that are very vital for sustainable development. So we have the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, also the Paris Agreement, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing Development, and very important for resilience, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And then on top of that, also the new urban agenda. So basically, yeah, the idea, or like what we observed back then, was that this is challenging for cities to actually align and also implement these agendas, because cities need to align their activities with the agendas and monitor. So a lot of times there is resources lacking, also political backing by national governments, and therefore actors at the local level are in need of guidance to support implementing these agendas in an integrated manner. And then on top of that, we have now, as we see, cities face multiple crises. There's the pandemic that halted years of progress towards achieving the SDGs. Then we also have the war in Ukraine, as we all know, that again, threatened access to food globally, and also the energy crisis connected to this. So again, it's very prominent that local governments are under pressure and need guidance in implementing and achieving the global agendas. We developed City Works. This is from our fact sheet. So basically, we developed this toolbox in order to support cities in implementing the global agendas, and also to align their plans with national policies, also taking in mind the principle of leaving no one, and as we like to say, also leaving no place behind. And how do we do this? We enable advisors. We also combine different methodology with sector-specific tools and provide a step-by-step approach. Here's the next sign. So we developed an approach that cities can use. It's composed of 3 phases and 8 steps. And in each step, there is specific tools for this specific step. So this provides cities a standardized and also structured approach to align their actions with global agendas, and to think about the different, like monitoring or also prioritizing, so about the different steps they can take. And where did we apply City Works so far? This is a map of our applications we've done so far. So we do also sometimes just ad hoc advisories. So if there is a program that wants to strengthen the focus on the Agenda 2030, then we also do ad hoc advisory services, but also we do full applications of City Works in a given GIZ program. So in red, you can see the different, the names of the GIZ programs. Mostly these are decentralization programs or capacity development programs with a focus on a global agenda. Mostly so far it has been a 2030 agenda, but we don't exclusively also focus on that. And our most recent application was in Bangladesh. Evandro and Lucy are also here, so they have worked for us as consultants, so they are quite familiar with City Works. Then, given the short time, I just present one example so that you have a better understanding on how this can look on the specific case. So, for example, we had an application in Egypt within the Participatory Infrastructure Project, in short PIP, and we did trainings for 8 Egyptian governorates. The idea here, it's always, of course, a different case, as every city is different, was to align already existing urban measures with the SDGs, as this has not been done so far. And also to foster multi-level dialogue between different stakeholders. So we did twice a 3-day workshop in July and August 2019, and more than 50 representatives from local authorities, also the Informal Settlement Development Fund, and representatives from NGOs and academia participated. And in the end, we, the workshop helped the employees of local governments to also think about the SDGs when planning urban measures, and to develop methods to also monitor the achievement on the SDGs through urban measures. Further. Okay. And now this is in short, in very, very short, what CityWorks is about. Some of you already know it, and if not, you can for sure check our website and also check the video that I wanted to present. And now I want to dive a little bit deeper into what we do on resilience. Because as I already mentioned, we noticed in the last years that most applications were on the Agenda 2030, as this is the most known or most prominent. However, we also wanted to completely address also the other agendas, like the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework. So in 2021, we did 2 extensions of CityWorks to strengthen this part within CityWorks, one on climate and the other one on so about the resilience part, so the question would be also it's about to be developed. What does resilience have to do with global agendas? And as you might assume, of course, a lot. So in resilience and disaster risk reduction, we talk a lot about shocks and stresses. And according to UN Habitat, shock is a sudden external event, whereas a stress is an ongoing factor, putting systems under pressure. So if we have a look at shocks and stresses, they are linked to several of the agendas. So we have the Sendai Framework that aims to the substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihoods, and health. And thereby it works to prevent and deal with acute shocks. Like, here are some examples like floods, earthquakes, but also disease outbreaks. So these ones are on the left side. And if we look at the stresses, the Paris Agreement shall mostly strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise under 2 degrees, as we know. And this is on the right side. So also in the center, we have of course, the Agenda 2030, but also the new urban agenda, which seeks to create a mutually reinforcing relationship between urbanization and development. And if we look again at the Agenda 2030 with the SDGs, we can also see how these are specifically linked to resilience in a lot of ways. So this is a framework that that our partner 100 Resilient Cities, or now also known as the Resilient Cities Network, developed. We worked with them in another project that I will present in short, and they developed this framework that we also use a lot when we talk about resilience. So here we can also connect the SDGs with the different categories that they developed. So the first one is health and well-being. Second one, economy and society. The third is infrastructure and environment, and fourth, leadership and strategy. And here again, we have the different global agendas that are linked to these SDGs and also the 4 categories in the resilience framework. Exactly. And as I said, in 2022, we developed this extension, and this was mainly done. We didn't do it just on the table discussing. We actually wanted to use the learnings from a project that we implemented in 2021 to enhance the CityWorks with new tools. So in 2021, we received 1 million by BMZ on a program called Resilient Cities Action Package. that help selected city to better cope with the impact of the COVID pandemic and to develop resilient strategies for the future. So it was both focusing on direct recovery and long-term resilience. And we worked together with ICLEI, Resilient Cities and Cities Alliance in this part in 3 countries and 5 cities. And the outcome of this was the development of 6 new tools for CityWorks focusing on resilience. And Evandro is here on the call. He actually developed the tools. So and in a bit, I would also go shortly through the tools. Evandro, I saw that you raised your hand, but do you want to jump in right now? I think this was by mistake, right? I guess.
Support.
Sorry? Okay, I think the connection is not okay. Anyways, later on with the questions. So yeah, we developed 6 tools specifically for resilience that you can see in CityWorks by this icon with the umbrella and the 3 symbols on top. And now I would shortly, like 2 or 3 minutes, go through the website. Okay, wrong button. Okay, I see. No worries. I will shortly show you the website with a specific focus on the resilience extension and then go over to Philip. All right. Okay. So here's our website. This is the landing page with a preview on what we offer on the website. Then we have the toolkit. This is mainly the core part of the website. So here we have what you already saw in the presentation with the 8 steps we have here in a linear depiction. And so we have the 3 phases and with these 8 different steps. And if you click on one step, you can see the different tools that we developed for this specific step. And if you go on one tool, then there's always a description with the goal, the different tasks, and also the materials for this tool. So in a city, if like consultants advise a city or a city wants to enhance their work on the specific step, or there is a lack of something, then they can do this in a workshop setting. Then we have a more content page, the global agendas page. So here are the 5 different agendas that we address. And then you can click on one of them. I go here now for the Sendai framework, because this is the one that focuses most on resilience. And so we have here a short description of the agenda, the original source, and also the what we offer with regards to this agenda in CityWorks. And on the down here, there's the tools that we developed specifically for resilience. As I said, with this specific icon. And then we also have the stories of success. So here we have short summaries of the cases where we applied CityWorks, so that also peers can learn from each other and also read what has been done in, for example, Guatemala, and see here the tools that have been applied, and also the description of what was the challenge, what did we achieve with CityWorks, and sometimes there's also new tools that are developed in the process. Last but not least, last 2 things. So here's the library with a quick guide. So in case you don't know CityWorks yet, please feel free to scroll through it or recommend it, further multiply it. And now I would, as a last part, because we talk about resilience today, focus on the tools that we developed and show you one tool. I go on the main page. And this is the digitalized tool that Evandro developed. Just shortly presenting this. So basically, here we have a map of a global map, so we can pick a city, and then we can add challenges and opportunities to the map. And then also, one moment, opportunity, so here, for example, we could, I make this very brief now. So we can add a challenge or an opportunity, and then also put a stress or a shock to it. For example, if there is in the area like a flooding risk, we can on the map exactly depict this area, and then we can also connect it to the definition of shocks and stresses by UN Habitat, and thereby design a whole map. And recently we've done this in El Salvador. So I show you the map, what we did there. So yeah, this is how it looks then. So we can depict a specific area, then also link it to the SDGs that are addressed. For example, here is a flooding risk. And then, yeah, different members of CityWorks, different users can use this in a workshop setting or put all the data together to have a map of different shocks and stresses. So thereby see how to maneuver with resilience or develop resilience strategy based on the map for specific regions. But maybe also Evandro can share more on this later, or add something to it. And I will hand over directly to Philip now, or in case there are some questions, we could also make a short break.
I would, for the sake of time, let's finish first and then see how that connects also to this new framework you guys are working on, and then questions can already be posted in the chat in the meantime.
Yeah, okay, then I will jump to Philip's part. 1 second. Okay, yeah, this is it. So over to you.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for having me and Eva. Just 4 slides. I'll try and keep this brief to update those who are on the call about the task force that we have been working in for a few months now. So since September of last year, a combination of colleagues from the sectoral department as well as the as colleagues from Globe have been jointly working together on a task force on urban resilience, and we have 2 objectives. The first one is to map existing approaches in the areas of urban resilience, and also to create a knowledge product or toolbox. We're still defining that for easy access to key information on these approaches. We've used the very innovative tool of Excel. Everyone is very familiar with this groundbreaking technology, but jokes aside, we needed something that really could map out a lot of information, and we have use the following mapping template, where we look at, for example, the type of approach, the potential climate or disaster impacts that are addressed by this approach, the process of implementation, results and impacts, cooperation partners, which resources were required, what the level of intervention was administratively in the country, so if it's national or regional or city or neighborhood. We then look at the sphere of approach, what sort of the thematic focus is. We look at which main hazards are being addressed, and the urban. Yeah, are we good with the slide?
Yeah, sorry, maybe perhaps it was on my end. I just don't see the. Now it's there. Sorry.
Okay, good. Yes. Yeah, so we looked at different categories. I listed some of them, but in principle, this was about trying to put a framework and try to really distill all the information that we gathered. And finally, we also looked at, for example, the type of risk management. So if it's preventative, or if it looks more at resistance or transformation. Exactly. You can go to the next slide, Eva. Thank you so much. The tentative results of the mapping are in, and we're refining these currently. So we got respondents from roughly 35 projects with roughly 90 different resilience approaches. And a few tidbits that could be interesting are that 41% of the approaches focused on the national or the subnational level. So that's the macro and the meso level. Over 80% of them have a focus on a socio-political sphere of intervention, or shall we say governance, and an environment, whereas only 33% had an economic focus. Over 50% of the approaches focused on flood risk management, 13% on geologic-related hazards, and 19% focused on all hazards. And finally, the type of risk management strategy, prevention, resistance, and transformation were all above 50%. Next slide, please. Thank you. And regarding our next steps, now we're consolidating, cleaning, and quality controlling the data. We then are going to cluster these different resilience approaches. We're going to provide short descriptions of what these 90+ approaches are like. And then we would like to turn this groundbreaking tool of Excel, this master list, into something that's actually usable for projects. So we don't just want to share an Excel with all of our projects just so they're flooded, not just like in this picture, but that they're flooded then with Excel, but rather that it's something that they can really use in their day-to-day. And ideally, we would like to do this by the summer. And I think that is it from my side.
Great. Thanks, Philip and Eva, for setting the scene about on the one hand, CityWorks, of course, on the experience with this amazing tool, and of course also with this new toolbox you guys are developing, and of course looking on learning from the different experiences and seeing what is it that we are working on already. We still have a few minutes. We would open now for questions from the audience, and otherwise we would also use the time to make a short linkage also to the new training, as Eva mentioned in the beginning, of TurboClick, which we want to develop on net zero and resilient cities. So if questions, just unmute yourself and jump in. I have to check if there is anything already there. So perhaps share my screen again quickly. And one question, maybe just also to connect to what you said, we were looking at also doing this transfer of what the new framework you guys want to develop is about, and how can that connect to the net zero resilient cities training. And here just to quickly show what we thought of and how this all started and who would be benefiting from this approach. So the idea is to look at net zero and resilience, so mitigation and adaptation in a holistic way and not like separated, and do that with 4 lenses by looking on all the data that is needed to analyze and take action, to look, of course, on planning and governance as the entry points for taking action towards achieving net zero and resilient cities, but also with 2 different approaches of system thinking and futures thinking, which are also like quite used in this holistic, systematic way of analyzing something. And there's now here in the city looking at climate change mitigation and adaptation. And of course, we want to build upon on what's there already. And my idea, or my question now to you, Philip and Eva, where do you see a connection on this framework that you guys are developing? How could we benefit from this for developing this training? I mean, now the timeline is a bit different, or we are working in parallel, but can we cross-fertilize each other in this approach? And the question goes to everyone now also in the call afterwards. how would this be a beneficial tool for you as well, looking at this training? So how in Asia, or for our projects in Asia, but also of course beyond, if you have any ideas or suggestions, we would also like very much to tap on your brains here. And over to you, Philip.
Thanks, Lucy. I think the toolbox that we've envisaged is certainly something that you could use in a training. I don't know how much training time you would need. It's certainly not something that would need hours and hours of introduction. It's supposed to be something that's a little bit more self-explanatory. But it's also, I think, something that you need to just be exposed to then understand how it works. It's a little bit, for example, like all the Capacity Works tools we have. They're actually quite explanatory, but unless you know of them, you can't really use them. And I think the toolbox will go in the same direction. It should be easy to understand, and I think if you did it in 15 or 30 minutes, I think that would be enough, at least for this toolbox. Perhaps what might make it more interesting is to invite one or two people who were involved in the conception of it, or inviting people from projects that have used some of these approaches, that they can explain a little bit what they did, and that gives a bit more of like a hands-on experience. But I think really in understanding how to apply the tool, the idea is that it would be relatively straightforward.
Okay, great. And would you perhaps just say it's then more focusing on like project development, on how GIZ has worked towards? So is this more related to the staff, GIZ staff, learning from how to use the tool and how to benefit from it? Or how could that also be beneficiary for City itself, just to understand the layer and the target group?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is a classic issue, Lucy. We had this similar problem with the smart cities thing a few years ago, right? It's that I think a first step that often we do at GIZ is to do a mapping, and then we've mapped our approaches or our projects, and then we think, okay, what do we do next, right? And that's a little bit the point that we're at right now. I think certainly the toolbox should be helpful in systematizing a little bit, so that we have a coherence in terms of, as GIZ, we can say, look, these are the different types of things that we can offer. So in that sense, it could be useful when it comes a little bit towards business development, trying to secure new funding, also communicating to our partners. How much can it actually guide a project that is currently working on resilience initiatives? Maybe from a learning perspective, you could say, oh, look, there's another project that does something similar in Mexico. Let's reach out to them. But it's not something that's sort of a very technical tool that will, I think, bring forward the work that you're already doing in a certain resilience area. I think that for learning, it's useful. And I think also for project or business development, it can also be useful.
Good, thanks. Yeah, so any further questions? We still have 2-3 more minutes, and at this occasion, I also have to say that we are happy that we have Club, of course, Evandro and Mariano also now, who were working in this resilience extension for TurboClick, for CityWorks, and also on other CityWorks application and so forth. So they will be jointly with TurboClick developing this training. And the idea is, of course, to connect all these issues, right? So not to reinvent the wheel, but to make use of what's there already. And perhaps also to just let you know, one other information is that we have secured 10,000 euros of funds from the Two of Us funds to co-develop now in parallel something as an add-on to this. And we are now also exploring what would be beneficial in regards to the training, so perhaps transferring this training already to an e-learning format, but also perhaps beyond that is even looking at some browser application, which perhaps we could also connect to CityWorks, or any kind of gamification, and even virtual reality. Of course, this amount of money is not sufficient for virtual reality development, but we could come up with at least some mock-up or some initial ideas. And what we would ask you now is, if you have any suggestions, if you know of anything that is there already that we need to consider if you have ideas for what would benefit your project concretely. Now, this is the time to share with us. You can share in the chat, or you can also share afterwards. But yeah, now the process is starting, and we need to just be coherent in the development and to learn from each other and to make it as beneficial to you as possible. So that was the idea now for this last part. And perhaps I just stop sharing my screen as well, just to see if there is any feedback, any comment. Fatina, will this training be offered on demand, or are you planning on a general training open to interest colleagues at some point? So we want to test run part of it during the SNGA conference in October. With hopefully we can engage with partners, because that will be in Thailand, and we have now this new Urban Act project where they also are based in Thailand. So the idea is to have a test run, but it's demand driven. So we also need to see how to customize this to the setting of a country, and then to see also at some point how to perhaps institutionalize it at some point as well. Yeah, Katharina, thanks for joining and for presenting on PyVC. And I think for now it's also 1 minute after the time we had scheduled. I see Andrea is writing. We do appreciate if you have any suggestions regarding the training. We will stay in touch with you, Philip and Eva, regarding the framework, and also we will explore on how we connect the PyVC protocol also and mention it for infrastructure issues in this next training as well, and just connect to what is there already. And for that, I think this webinar was very fruitful and very successful for us to also understand these two different approaches. And so very interesting tools and quite relevant. Thanks so much, everybody, then for joining. Thanks, Eva, Philip, and Katharina for making the time to share your experience. We will make the presentations available and also the recording, and keep you updated about the training development, also the next events from TurboClick. And in any case, you can always reach out to us. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
Have a good week and a good Easter break. And take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank
Bye.
you.